Guys, I'm here with Dr. Lisa Lewis, who has come on the podcast to make us a little bit smarter, which is a tough task, and hopefully give us some amazing advice. Dr. Lewis, I saw you on a podcast recently. I was inspired. I asked you to come on, and you graciously did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Same here. So I want to start off right away. I know you're a psychologist. But you are also a fitness enthusiast. And most people on my channel are very much into fitness, or into martial arts, or into some physical activity. As far as the psychological part, in my experience as a coach, for people, whether their fitness goals are to gain more muscle or especially fat loss, I feel like fat loss is like a different level of difficulty mentally, and it's a much more like mentally high stress situation. Psychology plays such a massive part in how you talk to your clients, how your clients understand things, how they have their relationship with themselves, with food, with exercise in itself. What are some of the biggest things that you like to help people that maybe are trying to, let's go with weight loss for to say, what's like some of the struggles that people deal with, and how do you help them get past it from a psychological perspective?
Well, one of my main interests in the field of psychology is motivation, and specifically physical activity motivation. So my dissertation was about how people develop internal or intrinsic motivation to want to take care of their bodies and be physically active. And so based on what I've studied and hundreds of conversations I've had with people, I think it is very important for people to identify their own motives, the reasons why they care and why they want change, and to think about that as a fuel tank of motivation that you leverage, that you utilize in order to pursue your goals. And some types of fuel, some types of motivation are higher quality than others. So for example, having some kind of external reward for losing weight, like being a certain dress size or impressing someone at your high school reunion, this is a pretty external or extrinsic motive that's kind of low quality. Like it might get you to the gym sometimes, it might get you in a caloric deficit some days, but it doesn't have really good staying power or lasting power. So for some people, they could get 30, 60, or 90 days where they're really chasing some kind of really extrinsic goal like that. But for the most part, it's not a sustainable tank of motivation, especially in comparison to something higher quality, like a type of motivation that probably a lot of your listeners have, which is it's called integrated regulation, which means the reason why you engage in behaviors like practicing martial arts, engaging in competitions, trying to build muscle, is because those behaviors and habits help you demonstrate your identity, who you are as a person. So if there's an ER after an activity like I'm a CrossFit-er, or I'm a run-er, or I'm a lift-er, that means that you think that behavior is part of who you are as a person. So when you do that behavior, you are being you. You are doing you out there in the world. And that type of motivation is very sustainable. As you know, people will want to train or practice their martial art when they're injured, when they're tired, when they're sick, you name it. That motivation still stays really high quality. So I think helping people identify their motives and then using that as fuel is going to help them sustain behaviors long term.
That makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if you know much about my background, but I was 265 pounds, and I decided I wanted to become a professional fighter, which, my mom wasn't exactly super happy about.
I get that.
So, yeah. But I went through a lot of hardships when it came to my weight loss journey. One, I felt, I had an insane food noise, I think biologically, due to the fact that I was obese from such a young age. Like a tremendous appetite, like and not braggy, but it was semi-legendary the amount of food I was able to eat. And also, my love language within my family is very much food. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
we're like kind of loud, we're really brass, we're Greek, so we're yelling at each other all the time. No one's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I spoke to you this way." It's kind of like, "Come on, I'll make you a sandwich." Like, "Come on, I'm gonna be," I know it's like you brought an ice cream sundae. And that's how we just dealt with each other.
Yep.
So for me, when I tried to remove food, I felt like it was so hard. But what kept me pushing me through is I identified as myself as I am going to be a UFC fighter, and this is what a UFC
Mm-hmm.
fighter does. Not
Mm-hmm.
that it didn't come with a million failures, but that was part of the deal.
Yeah. So having that, attaining that identity really mattered a lot to you. And it sounds like you leveraged that probably hundreds and thousands of times each day as you were trying to be in a caloric deficit or make better food choices or train your body harder to get to make change.
Yeah, and I want to ask you something from something that I use with clients a lot. And I'm curious what your thought is. It's kind of an idea. So a lot of my clients, you know, they sometimes they came to me because, especially when I was younger, I was a bit more of a hard nosed coach. I was a young kid. I was mad at the world, so I was just a bit more rough and tough. And a lot of my clients liked that originally, and there was really a lot of like white knuckling through difficult times. And a lot of dieting that I did was a lot of white knuckling, like a lot of like really low calorie and kind of like I'm able to outsuffer this. And I have completely switched on this. And one of the reasons was because I believe it causes a ton of yo-yo dieting. Because and the way that I explain it to people is if you ever played Street Fighter and you're one of the characters, every time you hit your bar it goes down, at the end of the it goes all the way down, you get KO'd, you lose the round. And I think that's what happens with food is like every time you are needing to use your willpower, you only have so much left at the end. And
Mm-hmm.
preserving that and rebuilding that over time by doing little things, cutting yourself some slack, maybe going off of the diet for a couple weeks is the way to actually towards the long term. What do you think about that concept as a whole?
I love that concept. And also to hear about how your mindset has changed over time and about how in the short term you got some mileage out of that. Like you were able to get some results with that whole white knuckling, right? But long term, that is not sustainable. You need something bigger. I think that willpower and white knuckling is a tool in the toolbox that can work, but that energy source gets depleted pretty quickly. Like you said, you burn through that energy source and then you get knocked out. So you can't just use that tool. That is not a Swiss Army knife. That is like a specialty tool. And then you need other tools in the toolbox as well. So these other things that you're describing, like having a refeed or having a treat or taking days off or I know a dietitian who talks about real life treats, like what are the things you can go out in the world and enjoy that aren't necessarily food. All these are other tools to put in the toolbox. So you don't just have that one thing of willpower to get you through the whole journey because it's not going to get you through.
Yeah, and I feel that, one of the things that is from my experience, and I want you to feel free to disagree with me at all and any time. But my experience has been one of the biggest issues with people, and including myself and a lot of my clients, is it's not actually that even when their willpower breaks, it's not the fact that their willpower broke and they went and had three tubs of Ben and Jerry's. Not that I've ever done that. But it's not. That's not what this actually beats him up. It's the after effect of feeling this like I broke this promise to myself. I made this promise mean something so much to me, and it represented me again. It like described me. I was this person that was not
Mm,
going to eat the Ben and Jerry's,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
now I did. Now I feel horrendous about myself. Like now it's
Mm.
like am I the biggest piece of shit person in the planet? Like, and if I'm not, how can I tell myself I'm not? And it's like getting people to like, hey, it was just ice cream. And that doesn't mean much more than the fact that you wanted ice cream. You hadn't had ice cream in a long time, and you went a little overboard. And that's, it's not the end of the world. What do you think about that generally?
Well, that's right. I mean, shame is poison and it never really helps anybody in the long term. So, shame is the feeling I am bad, guilt is I did something bad. And we want to help people get out of shame as quickly as possible. And I like the words you use there, like ice cream does not mean that you are a bad person. It means that you ate too much ice cream. Let's move out of that mindset, because there really is nothing to gain out of shaming somebody. It backfires every single time. And in fact, shame is really the hallmark of addiction. So substance abuse was really the beginning of my career, and starting my journey in working with people with drug and alcohol addiction really helped me to be able to spot shame in other kinds of behaviors, like eating, for example, because when shame shows up, it just completely gets somebody off track and is unproductive. So I think getting rid of that as soon as possible and helping someone maybe look at what is productive, which is, okay, how did you get to the 3 tubs of Ben and Jerry's? Was it too much of a deficit for too long? Did you have a really hard conversation with a family member that just put you in a really triggered state? Let's look at what happened there and take that experience as data that could maybe inform how you make a better plan moving forward.
Yeah, this is another, you touch on something close to home to me there. As as someone that my mother dealt with addiction, and I was very close. My mother unfortunately passed away. I was very, very, very close with her.
Mm-hmm.
We were like the dynamic duo. It was basically me and her most of my life. She suffered heavily with alcoholism and substance abuse later in life more. Seeing her go through Alcoholics Anonymous and different programs like that, actually, I drew so many parallels from watching her addiction battle and like I don't want to say addiction to food because I don't like to consider that foods are as addicting, but the addictive behaviors that I was doing, there was a lot of parallels. Like it was not judged as badly when I went and like ate, 5,000 calories worth of food for dinner in front of everybody.
Right.
But the reaction was similar. Like my mom had a bad day at work. She felt like crap because her boss, she didn't hit quota this month or whatever the
Right.
situation was, or we're in economic struggle economically. I would be the same way. I lost a fight. I feel like crap and I don't have money to pay my bills. And okay, I take whatever I have left and devour a stack of pancakes. My mom would devour 2, 3 bottles of wine, but there was a lot of similarities there. I really, do you
Similar.
recognize that a lot with eating as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And people bring up this idea to me, like, can food be an addiction? And basically, any behavior that you do to get away from pain or to help cope or numb pain can be an addiction. And that can include eating. So when I think about addiction, I think, do you keep doing something that's harming you? Is your brain, is your mental preoccupation, your pie chart, so is the Tony pie chart more than 50% about eating, not eating, when am I going to eat, what am I going to eat, how much am I going to eat, am I a piece of shit if I do eat? So that mental preoccupation there. And so I think it's a lot of things, even in addition to drugs, alcohol, sex, food. I think there's all kinds of ways that people numb themselves out. And you named a really important feature, which is the hallmark, which is feeling shameful after you engage in the behavior. So you get that break, you get that numbness, you get that escape, and then the blowback is shame, which is so much more debilitating and then just causes the problem to want to repeat itself over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's like the start of the roller coaster, really. Like once the shame gets in, that's when things kind of kick off in the high gear. And this actually leads me to a question I had for you. This is how I deal with my clients, and I would love your feedback on this. So I tell my clients, especially ones that, I kind of make like a semi joke. I'm like, don't worry, here's Overeaters Anonymous. We're kind of, it's all good here. Like we can say whatever we want. I'll kind of let my clients, I'll joke around with them about it. Like, you know, whatever you've done, I promise you, I've done 10x worse. So, and I'll tell you, you tell me a story, I'll tell you a story. Like, let's go back and forth, right? And we'll kind of have a laugh about it. But I tell the ones that I could tell have seemed like similar inhibitions that I had when it comes to these things, I'll say you're never going to truly be not be a complete problem. This is always something that you have to somewhat keep in check. Like for me, I have tools in my toolbox. Like today, before our conversation, a friend of mine came over. He was like, I'm bulking now, so I'm trying to eat a little bit more. But my friend was like, oh, I want to like take you out. He took me to really nice food, and I went way above my calories. And my initial response, my mental response was kind of like, you should have controlled yourself. You shouldn't have had that much. You were on this plan. Like, where's your discipline? And that was my immediate. And even as I had it, I kind of like sat there. I was like, all right, man, you had a fun meal with your friend. Who cares? Like, who cares? This. What would be better, me to be not have a fun meal with my friend and have like 5,000 calories? Definitely, my life is going to be better because I had this moment and I had to like sit back, but I had to deal with it. If I just said I'm not that person anymore, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. And so I tell people like you are going to have to deal with it. Is that how you handle it with people that maybe have these kind of issues?
Yeah, that's right, because that's being a human being who is, imperfect and who, like, you're making this really good point about being able to enjoy your life. And that if you said, oh, I'm not going to go out to the meal, that would really have restricted you. So first I want to say thank you for sharing about your own experience. Maybe that's common on this podcast, but it's so nice to be able to talk about someone's actual lived experience. And secondly, I love that you recommend 12-step groups to people, because I think that like in the 10th grade or the 11th grade, we should all get exposure to 12-step programs. It really is about mental health, which is about boundaries, having healthy, flexible boundaries, and using relationships to help process our feelings as opposed to using a drink or a drug or a snack or whatever else. So that is a really nice thing that you do for your clients, is just to introduce the idea that their eating behavior is way more about getting to satiety. It is about taking care of their emotions, about how they connect in relationships. And we are all acculturated that way. You really connected it to your culture of origin, saying like there's a big part of how people handled their feelings. So it's a setup for people to be told like, oh, you should just count your calories and your macros and that should be enough for you. How can it be enough when food is love, food is connection, food is religion, food is ethnicity? I mean, it's so many other things to people. So offering them other kinds of ways to think about their relationship with food is really awesome. And then finally, what I'll say, in that vignette you described, that you were able to sit with two different parts of yourself. So you described enjoying the meal, and then that kind of like tough coach, boot campy kind of part of yourself came out and was like, what did you do there?
Yeah.
Kind of shaming, right? And then there's this other side that's like, dude, it's going to be all right. Like, chill out. This meal was nice to be with my friend and everything's going to be okay. And I can handle it. I can get back to my routine and my habits, and kind of almost like coach up that inner critic that can get on your case to help yourself calm down, cope, don't freak
Hmm.
out, and move on to the next thing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I have learned to try to be more open about my experiences in a completely selfish way, from the standpoint that I
Mm-hmm.
just have realized that it is quite liberating to not have the internal secrets. And because when it's internal, it's hard to fight. But when it comes out, it sounds almost silly sometimes. Like I'll go to tell someone like, "Oh, I'm so mad because I ate Ben and Jerry's last time." They'll be like, "Well, why?" And then you're like, "Yeah, why?"
Oh,
And it's like,
yeah.
"Ah, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not like I don't have diabetes or anything. Like I'm gonna be okay. Like okay, take a breath. Like it's all right. Like there's no danger here. Everything is okay. If I didn't say it out loud, then it's so easy in your own head to start playing these games, and then and then you're back into
Absolutely.
this roller coaster.
Well, and it's like they say in AA, you're only as sick as your secrets. So as part of the program is getting it out and talking about what you're thinking, and then having other people in a supportive environment like help you get to that moment of like, yeah, I shouldn't be sitting here worrying about Ben and Jerry's.
I'm curious to go off of, just talking about me, even though that's everybody's favorite subject. But I would actually want to hear your opinion on a lot of people nowadays in the fitness community, in the fitness world, that are following people. They'll see somebody on social media, he looks fantastic or she looks fantastic. You know, their abdominals are popping out, their delts are popping, and I think that body dysmorphia, from a standpoint of like comparison, it might be the worst I've ever seen it from people. I'm curious, just what's your opinion on that general? Do you agree? Do you see it more frequently now? And what are some of the things you do to help people that are dealing with
Well, I think it's rampant. I think it's probably always been a problem as long as human beings have been comparing. It is part of, we are social creatures. But now that we have access to seeing people who are airbrushed and AI'd and everything else all the time, all day, and we are flooded with images, the exposure is just so much higher to then, like when I was a teenager, I would get 17 magazine, and I'd see some airbrushed models in the magazine, and then
it?
I'd move on with my life. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm not getting I wasn't getting as much exposure to it as a teenager as what young people are now. And so I think that that's a big part of the problem, is there's a lot more to compare to, because there's a lot more out there that we're getting in our faces that are just either not real or not realistic. So I do hear my clients talk about this a lot. I ask them how they are managing their social media diet. Like, are they allowing crap in their feed? And how do you know if it's crap? If there's something in my feed and I look at a picture or I see a reel and it makes me feel like not good or makes me think something about myself, that's not for me. Just like if you eat something and it gives you an upset tummy, maybe that's not for you. And so you have to be a consumer who is intentional. Like, a lot of my Instagram feed is cute little puppies and like babies and things that make me laugh and feel happy. And it's not abs, because looking at, women in their mid-20s with abs just doesn't make me feel good. And that's me. So you need to be a choicey consumer about what you're looking at. And if something makes you feel bad, don't look at that. And I actually have talked to a lot of fitness professionals who follow other fitness professionals, and then they start comparing how many followers they have or whatever. And that is not good for their mental health. So we have to have a conversation about, what do you get out of following them, and what's the consequence of that, and is it really worth it? So being choosy about what you're looking at, I think, is one really good way to help people who don't have there are some people who have big time legitimate clinical body dysmorphia disorder, which I think requires more than just looking at their social media diet. But I would say that's an important first pass.
Yeah, I've had clients that, I'm not talking about. I've had clients that have dealt with bulimia and anorexia as well, that I've immediately moved to. I've helped them find a therapist, to someone that's a professional to deal with it. But I have also had a lot of clients that maybe they're not to there. That they're not doing anything that's quite dangerous to their body. But it's like, an example would be like a client that got abs but realized he's a little too skinny, wants to get a little bit bigger, too skinny from his own, whatever societal
Right, right.
thoughts are.
That's right.
Yeah, and he wants to gain some weight, starts bulking, the abs leave, he can't do it, he starts dieting again, and he's perpetually stuck at the point that he's constantly unhappy with how he looks. And is a guy that works out 6 days a week, that eats really healthy, but he's, because he can't get over this ideal in his head, he can't move past it. And I've struggled with people at that level, because it's really hard to tell somebody that it's okay and you look great, because it doesn't matter how many times I say it. It's almost it's almost like it's falling on deaf ears. It's like, yeah, but my abs aren't showing when I take off my shirt unless I'm in perfect lighting. And you're like, yeah, it's better than 99% of people look good with their shirts off. Like,
Yeah.
but it's not enough. It's like they can't handle it. And yeah, I really struggle trying to figure out ways to maneuver around that. I find.
Yeah, this is a good example because it's not necessarily mental illness, like a clinical disorder.
Yeah,
It's underneath that level. But you have a front row seat to the mind fuckery. I hope it's okay to say that word on your
yeah,
podcast.
please, please.
That
Yeah,
is the fitness complex and the way that we hold in high esteem people with very low body fat. Right, because this is all abdominals are about is getting lean enough. I mean, you could still be skinny and show abs, right? So people get screwed up by the environment. And at the same time, we all need to take care of ourselves. So over 70% of the population now, I think, is overweight or obese. So most of us could benefit from dropping a few pounds and being a little more physically active. So there's this mix of like things that are important and things that have value, and then things that have no value and things that are ridiculous and just comparison based. And you and everybody else in the fitness industry, we have to figure out how to help people thread that needle and how to find not just healthy, sustainable behaviors, but behaviors that are right for them, that are going to help them live 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years with a healthy weight and with feeling relatively good about the way they eat and how they treat their body. And I think that's a really long game, and that's a really tall order, especially in the midst of all the garbage that is all around us in the environment and in the media.
yeah. Like I feel like it's it's a crazy world because maybe you would have had one friend in like all your years of life that would like walk around with a six pack all day long, and you're just like, oh, that's Chris. Like that's how Chris is. He's just been like that since I known him in the fourth grade. I have a friend like that, by the way. He's annoying, and it's like, yeah,
He's
he's
got the
croissants.
genes, right?
He got the
Probably.
genes. It all works out. But you never got weirded out, being like, "Why am I not as ripped as Chris?" Because you knew Chris was an outlier. Like some guy, my other friend, 6'10". He's 6'10". What are you gonna say? Like
What
that's
are you going to
but you
say?
see it on Instagram, and you're seeing multiple outliers in a row, and now you're like, "Oh, this is." And I don't want to use the word achievable because it is achievable to get very, very lean. And there is some genetic limitation to how lean each person can get, but and stay muscular. But the variance is huge with we're talking everyone can get very lean with abs. But it's not that it's the same thing for me to get that lean as it is for somebody else. And you might be able to see my abdominal muscles, and and it does for me, take a tremendous amount of work to do it, and put a lot of dampers on my everyday life, to be
You got
honest.
it.
And, yeah,
It's like,
versus
how's
like
that
somebody else,
working
like,
for
just,
you? Is it worth it? Because that's right. Like, I would love to have abs too, but if I want to have abs, I cannot go out to dinner with my girlfriends. I cannot ever have ice cream with my son. Like, I have to say no,
yeah,
97% of the time. And no, thank you. It's just not worth it to me. And so I think people need to have like a come to Jesus with that. And
yeah,
I hear you have these goals. There's a meme I like to use when I give lectures about that. And there is this hilarious picture of Jack Black. And it says, I want a hot body and I want to eat tacos. And I think that dilemma is very real for all of us. And what is
yeah.
the right balance that is going to maximize your health, and which includes your happiness and your mental health with what your goals are?
And I also think that it's okay for you to have seasons. Like the way that I do it is essentially like I have seasons. Like, hey, this is my I'm gonna get super ripped and take a bunch of pictures from my Instagram
Right,
channel and
right.
hope people buy my training program because they see my
Yep,
abs. I'm
yep.
doing this for the next 4 months. It's gonna kind of be rough, but at the same time, it's kind of fun because it's like this challenge, and I'm gonna do it. And I know once I'm done with this, I'm going to follow still protocols. I'm gonna reverse diet. I'm gonna try not to get obese because I know the other side of the swing, but I'm gonna treat myself right and do it really well. I'm gonna enjoy some tacos and Tacos sound delicious, actually. Some tacos and like some chips and salsa and maybe a
Yeah.
margarita as well in my process. You got me started. And so like I that isn't but it's my season. My one season is 4 months of this or 3 months of this or whatever the case might be. And then it's going to be another 3 months and it might switch back and forth depending on.
Right. So, and one of the important things you just said is 4 months. This is not going to be every day for the rest of my life that I'm going to, underneath my t-shirt, have a 12 pack or whatever. Right. And I think that people need to understand that the images that they're looking at is someone, who is really leaned out, who has been working towards that. I remember seeing in, I forget what those magazines are called, like People magazine, magazines where there's like pictures of movie stars and musicians in their
Yeah.
everyday life. They would have pictures of stars at the beach who were not super skinny or didn't have all their abs. Like, oh, look, so and so got heavy. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, they're just not all leaned out for some crazy movie where they have to be in shape. So instead of normalizing that, and being honest about the ridiculous shape that people have to get into for a movie or a photo shoot or whatever, it's just sending the completely wrong message and encouraging people to think that they need to achieve something really hard and then stay there for the rest of their lives, which sounds pretty miserable.
I'm about to give up halfway through that conversation. I was like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I'm back to. Let's go back to the tacos and margarita conversation. I'm in. No, I'm
Yep.
100% in agreement. I think that is generally. I think it's one of the misconceptions people have with fitness and with people you're seeing online. And don't get me wrong, there are the guys. One, there are the guys that are genetically naturally lean all the time. There's also the guys that are a ton of gear that are also lean. And I'm not criticizing any of those guys. Like, cool. Like, I think everyone should be down there. And there's also the guys that they just, even if they are on gear or not, they're still trying really hard to be lean all year round. The question has to be is not what your goal is, kind of what you're willing to sacrifice for your goal.
Right.
Like that's really what you gotta say. And I think people beat themselves up with like, oh, I'm not willing to sacrifice ice cream and I want to go have margaritas with the girls or I want to, whatever the situation might be. Like I'm not willing to sacrifice that, and that means that I'm undisciplined, or I'm not tough, or I'm not, mentally
Mm,
strong. And I
mm,
think that's the opposite. I think if you know what you want and you go do it, that means you are mentally strong. You know exactly what you want to do, and you're doing what you need to do, and you only have this life to live. So it's a greght thing to do.
And I like that example because you're talking about being mentally strong is stability, but it's also flexibility. Just like to be a good athlete, you need stability and you need mobility. You need to be able to move in space and to be agile. And so I think mental skills, when it comes to taking care of your body and eating, you also need mental agility. You cannot just be this rigid person who's eating the same amount of calories and exact amount of macros every single day. That's not the way life works. If that black and white thinking of like, if I have a margarita or if I go out with my girlfriends and eat the chips and salsa, then I failed. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't support you going after your goals. It's better to say, what is the most amount of margaritas and chips I can have and still make progress towards my goal? Is that once a month? Is that every 2 weeks? Is that one bowl of chips and salsa? Is that one or two margaritas? Asking those kinds of questions. How much fun and enjoyment can I get and still make progress is a much more productive question than just saying, if I have zero treats, I fail. And if I have one, or if I have zero treats, I succeed. And if I have more than one, I fail.
I like that, and I think this leads me to something else. Another a diet thing I hear a lot is people are like, you can fit whatever you want into your diet. All foods can fit in your diet as long as it fits in your macros. That's one dieting approach, which obviously works, right? Like I'm not going to say that does not work. But I do think from a person to person, it should differ in depending on the person's own psychological makeup. So say for me, I've kind of developed into if it fits your macros approach over many, 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 many years. In the beginning, if I were to have one Oreo cookie during that process, that led into 30 packs of Oreo
Yeah.
cookies.
Yeah.
Now I could probably have an Oreo cookie. But to be honest, if I'm trying to cut in that 4 months period, I'm trying to get abs, I probably make myself more miserable by having that Oreo cookie than not having the Oreo cookie. And I tell my clients, I always work with them. I try to be open with them about what are they able to do. Like what makes you feel better. Like, okay, your goal is to lose 30 pounds. We gotta lose 30 pounds. That's not an easy goal. We got quite a hefty amount of goals. So we're gonna have to really break this down to get there. Do you need a cookie every cup? Some people need it. They love it. They have their cookie in the morning and that satisfies them. They feel great. They're like, I have my little treat and I don't feel like I need to have anything else. And I can go have chicken and broccoli in the afternoon. Other people, you had the cookie. I don't want to see chicken broccoli. I want 3 banana splits.
Right.
Do you see that? Or are you like, no, everyone needs to train their way into if it's a macro, build a healthy
No.
enough relationship?
No, because what you just gave an example of, there's a qualitative difference between I eat the cookie, I'm satisfied, I enjoyed it, I move on with life, versus I eat the cookie and then I want 15 or 20 more and I can't stop, and then I think the whole day is blown. So that, to me, I think about that as a trigger food. When you eat it, does it turn you into a negative space, or do you enjoy it and move on? And I think probably a lot of us have trigger foods. So, for example, I do not keep granola in the house because I could put a couple of tablespoons on my oatmeal in the morning, but then once I have a long day or a bad night's sleep, or I'm talking on the phone with somebody I don't really want to be talking to, guess what is going to start to happen? So the way I think about that is a food that I cannot keep in my house in safety, because it is going to get eaten in a way that is inconsistent with the way I want to eat. And so if you have that, it doesn't mean I can't have some granola if I'm at the hotel and, I'm at the breakfast bar and I want a little scoop. It doesn't mean like never, ever, ever. It just means like that's a food that if it's in my house, I'm going to want to crack out on it probably if I get hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed out, fill in the blank. So the Oreo example you gave is like that, right? So for whatever reason, it creates some kind of reaction in your mind and in your body that turns you away from your goals and gets you like over focused on eating more of that food. And I mean, there are a lot of really highly palatable foods out there that are designed to make us crack out and want to overeat them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with anybody if they have that reaction to particular food, but it's like, know what your trigger foods are. There's plenty of delicious foods that I can have in my house and not overeat. So I got a bag of cookies that I keep in the freezer because they would go bad if I didn't have them in the freezer. And every night or every 2 nights, I take one out of the freezer after dinner and I let it defrost and I have it, as a glass of milk, my snack at night. And that works for me because I'm not thinking about the bag of cookies in the freezer all day, every day. I'm not having one when I'm not hungry. But that's me. So I think it's important for people to know what are the foods that they feel comfortable keeping around, and then what are the foods that it just feels like too heavy of a lift to eat 1 or 2 and then leave the rest sitting there.
And I do think that there is room for rigidity at times. So like maybe you're in a mental space where I really want to get this weight down. I'm uncomfortable. I'm unsatisfied with some reason for physically my life, the way I look, my health markers, and I want to make a change. Like I'll give a recent, and I could talk about it publicly because I put him on the podcast. My cousin he got a blood test randomly, and in Greece they just added LPA to the blood panel, like from the national insurance. So he got his blood panel. He saw his LPA was super elevated. Ended up everyone in the family has high LPA because it's genetic. But the actual thing that was a little more worrying, because LPA by itself being high is a risk factor, but the real risk factor is if your LDL is also high. So his LDL was through the roof, and he had high sugar. His glucose levels were high. So it like terrified him. It terrified him. And he can't, we talked over together. And I was like, listen, man, like, you're 30 some years old. You're going to be fine. Like, we just got to start making some changes. And he was like,
Right.
what should I do? I said, you need to cut, he stopped smoking right away. That's all, bit first one. Number one, we got to stop smoking. Two, we're gonna have to add some fibers, some omega-3 fatty acids, exercise, data, yada. Not to get into all the details, but it was quite rigid, and he was like, he needed that rigidity because he was cutting out smoking, which is really really hard. Like, I think it's unbelievably hard. I'm not a smoker, but I've seen multiple people cut smoking. I just see the agony of it in their face, and it seems unbelievably hard. And I was like, he kind of sometimes would get like his mom would be like, you don't have to be all this. And then I actually told her, I said, I disagree. I think it's good for him. He got scared and he did what you should do when you get scared is make a change. He took an action. He didn't just get scared and live in a ball of anxiety in the corner. He's feeling better because he's taking action. And so I think rigidity does definitely have a place in this.
Absolutely. And he was ready for it, you know, like he
Hmm.
was welcoming that rigidity from you. So I think if he was more resistant and hemming and hawing and arguing with you about
Hmm.
every single food and choice, that would have been a different scenario. But you led with tips and instructions, basically, right? And he took it. He was ready to take that on. He had, I think in the book about change, they call that a highly emotionally charged experience. So him getting scared like that put him in that space where he was really ready for what your recommendations were going to be. And so if somebody's ready like that and they're responsive, yeah, like shoot for the moon, you know? And they say that when it comes to changing your health related behaviors, you actually get more bang for your buck when you stack them and you do, like people will say, oh, I'm just quitting smoking. I don't want to work on anything else. But actually, people who quit drinking and smoking at the same time have more success than people who just quit drinking and don't quit smoking, or vice versa. So the fact that he's working on what he's eating and working on not smoking, I think that's a really powerful combination that I hope will yield him some good results.
Well, actually, we dropped his LDL down by 50%.
Oh my God.
Uh, yeah,
Wow.
he's no glucose is perfect. He's put
Wow.
on like probably like 2 kilograms of muscle
Wow.
in that time. He's a different person altogether now. Still
Amazing.
fighting the non-smoking. Definitely, he
Totally.
told me like that still is a challenge, but
Sure.
he's been he stopped smoking now for 6 months. So yeah, it was really really positive.
Wow.
Um, this brings me to something I also would like to talk about. And I got this idea today before our conversation. And it was just something I was kind of meditating on as I was walking. When you go to the gym and you lift weights, and I'm going to lift a bench press, and it's going to be really hard. And I know it's going to be hard. Nowadays, that's no big deal for me. Like, I'm like, yeah, I enjoy it. The truth is, I get like a little like, it kind of reminds me of my fighting days. It's also the same thing with fighting. Like, I know it's going to be this sparring session is going to be hard. It's going to kind of suck, but I'm kind of getting into it. I almost trained myself to be able to handle that anxiety, difficulty, that you would get from doing a difficult task. And I'm curious. I see one of the biggest issues with people generally, but if we want to keep it around the food dieting culture, is the uncertainty. Like, dealing with uncertainty is hard. Like, am I going to, whether you're starting a business or whatever it is, am I going to do this and yield no results? And that is like probably the scariest part. I'm curious, do you have an opinion on, like, or maybe even a way to train dealing with uncertainty?
Well, the way to train dealing with uncertainty is to deal with uncertainty. And, you know, when you speak to this, I think you're speaking to human nature because the brain's job is to make predictions of what's going to happen and then how to prepare the body and the mind for what's going to happen. So our brain at all times is using stimulus from the environment and then past experience to make predictions about what we're going to need to mount a response day by day. So uncertainty is very expensive for the brain. When something is nebulous, when something is unclear, the gears are turning, the mind is going, and the less there is in the environment, the more somebody's going to rely on their past experience to tell a story, to make a prediction about what's going to happen. So if you have clients who have not had success with weight loss or fat loss or hypertrophy or whatever their goals are, they have no way to make a strong prediction that something good is going to happen because they don't have that lived experience. What they have is you giving education, giving support, increasing their competency about what happens when they do resistance training and eat protein and blah, blah, blah. So we can add information, education to the environment, and then we have to encourage people to be able to tolerate uncertainty, which I think about kind of as time under tension, right? Which you need to get stronger. So if you want somebody to get stronger, you have them do planks or iso holds or time just, resistance with load on their body. And that helps their tissue to be stronger and more resilient and to develop. So if we want people to get better at sitting with uncertainty, they got to sit with uncertainty and then see that can come out in their favor. So I think about you as a coach, you're scaffolding that, right? So what are you doing? You're providing information. You're letting people know how it works, that people can build muscle and lose fat. You're giving them suggestions about training to do, nutrition to eat. So you're giving them that framework. And then you're asking them to show up and to really be with the uncertainty of what's going to happen or not. And then what you got to do at every single opportunity is you've got to reflect data to them that shows them that something is happening, that they're making progress. So that means every time they put 5 more pounds on the bar, you got to shout it out. Look, you just progressed in how much resistance you can tolerate. When you see them do more reps, when you see some kind of change, or you can show them with like an in-body or some other kind of feedback, like changes that are actually happening to them, that decreases the level of uncertainty because they're seeing like, oh, if I put input in, I get input out. So that reflection to them of every little piece of progress that they get helps to reduce that uncertainty, and then they're willing to tolerate more. Okay, I'll come and train 3 times a week, or let me, you know what, I can cut out that little X, Y, or Z. They want to progress themselves because they see that they're getting a return on their investment.
That's great. I like the way that you said it. I feel that I do this. Like I try. This seems like I kind of naturally try to do this. But
Right.
now that you've said it out loud, I structured it in my brain. I'm gonna build this out a little bit. Thank you. That was fantastic. So I want to ask one more question to finish off because we're getting close. I've kept you for 15 minutes, me babbling on. So I'm going to guess the last one. I had an experience where I fought. So I was in I got to the UFC, which was my main goal. Fought. Right before I got in the UFC, I got an injury on my knee. I kind of was like, I didn't know I was going to go to the UFC because I'd want to fight. My manager actually told me, oh, you got to take another fight. I was under a lot of economic stress, broke up with my girlfriend. My mom got admitted into a mental asylum for a psychotic break. And I was in another country and I didn't even have enough money to go back and help her. It was just a horrific time.
Yeah.
So I spent the next like 2 months going to what I do. I was eating cookies and ice cream, and my grandmother was happy to feed me as much as humanly possible at the time. And I also got into like smoking marijuana much more than I would have ever. I always have smoked marijuana recreationally, but like as an adult, but that I was doing it much more heavily than I was before. And then I got called up to the UFC randomly. Like one day, I got an email saying, "Hey, you want to come fight this guy in 3 weeks?" And I was obese, essentially. I was really fat. I was completely untrained. It was horrible. I, of course, accepted it. I had one of the most brutal weight cuts, losing 16 kilograms in a matter of 3 weeks,
Jesus. Oh my God.
uh, passing out multiple times during the weight
Yep.
cut.
Yep.
And I showed up at the fight looking physically the worst I've ever looked.
Mm-hmm.
So I got annihilated online. It was the beginning of the Twitter days. Then we're talking 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I was brutalized by the fans. He doesn't belong here after 10 years of working and kind of coming from a very disadvantageous situation to get there. It really like destroyed me, right? And then like after that, my next fight in the UFC, where I did a lot of things better, but I still was really struggling with everything that happened before. And I went out there and performed badly and I lost. And quite after that, dealing with that defeat was the thing that changed my life the most. Like the most change I've ever made was kind of going down from there and
Mm-hmm.
then being like, what really changed was I was sitting with my friends and they were watching some stupid show and they were laughing at the show and they were all there and they were just laughing and slapping my arms and I was like, well, they just don't care. Nothing's changed. This is exactly how it was before. Like everything's exactly the same. And I'm like, oh my, what am I so beat up about? That happened. It's over. I failed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I torturing myself? And that kind of gave me like, oh, I can fail and do things again and like come back. Like, I don't need this to be the end. And that kind of changed and the thing that really matters, my relationship, the people that I love, they're still there. Like, that kind of like changed my mindset to be able to move. And I see that a lot with clients that are so worried about failing on their diet, they're failing on their training, and they feel that that failure is permanent. Like, oh, I gained 2 pounds this month for some reason, and I thought I was doing it right, and my calories were low, and I don't understand what happened. Dealing with failure, I feel like might be one of the most important traits to have, and if we're going to stick more in the fitness to that fitness journey, but I think in life. Do you have any advice for people that on how to deal with failure?
Well, I love your example. Thank you again for sharing. One of the ways I operate as a therapist is to be listening closely for what somebody's character strengths are. So we all have different strengths, and a lot of psychology is about looking for deficits or problems, but one of the ways I think it's really effective to support people is to really have a good understanding of what your character strengths are and how you can leverage them. And so in this vignette and other things you've said in this interview, you describe being able to take perspective. So you describe being able in really tough, difficult moments to sort of get a little bit of distance and take a look at what's happening and to put it into perspective and say, what am I getting all bent out of shape for? Or how do I want to respond to this situation? Or is it really a big deal what just happened? And that ability to take perspective has really helped you in your life overcome challenge or failure or adversity or uncertainty. So for you, like if you were my client, I would be calling that out as I got to know you. And then I would be saying to you as we approach challenges in your life, how can you leverage perspective in this problem? Because that's something you're really good at. And different people have different character strengths. And if you haven't heard of this before, what I'm saying, there's a free questionnaire that people can fill out online. It actually is a very well validated questionnaire to assess what your top character strengths are. So there are a number of character strengths, and getting to know what yours are and thinking about how you can leverage the very best of yourself in challenges and problems that come up is an excellent way to try to think about dealing with adversity. Because what a lot of people do is they think about their weaknesses. They come at problems in life with how to fix what's wrong with them. And not that that is useless, it's not. It is very useful to think about what is the very best of me, what am I really good at, and how can I use that to deal with this challenge in my life.
So I have one question for Vigo. Can you tell me
Yes.
the
So
actual
the name
what
of the
is it?
questionnaire is the VIA character strengths survey. And the website is viacharacter.org, I believe. And it's free. So
Okay.
it might ask you to buy something, but you don't need to buy anything. You could just take the questionnaire, and then it will rank order. It'll take you about 20 minutes to fill it out. And it will rank order all of the character strengths according to what you endorse. So you'll get a list at the end from top to bottom. And I like to look at the first like 7 or 8 on the top of the list with people.
All right. Amazing. Well, Dr. Lisa, I am going to tell you that this has been one of my favorite podcasts. I feel
Hey.
like I had a therapy session. It's fantastic, honestly. Um, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with me and listening to me ramble. Everyone loves to do that, so thank you for doing that, and I really appreciate it. And I hope you had a good time and was a good informative podcast.
It was my pleasure. And I think people learn best when there's honesty and transparency, and you really bring your humanity to the conversation, which I think really helps us to have a meaningful dialogue. So it was absolutely my pleasure.
Dr. Lisa, thank you so much.
You're welcome.